This week on the Derek's Live, building a marriage worth your legacy. Over the next few weeks, we're introducing the 6 pillars of a lasting marriage. It's episode 14. Let's fucking go. What's going on, guys? My name's Sean. I'm going to be your host here. Welcome to the Derek's Live podcast for badass parents. I'm here with my beautiful wife and co-host, Emily.
Hi, guys. How are you tonight?
Hey. How you doing, Emily?
I'm here.
You're here. What is that supposed to mean? Where else would you rather be?
Right here.
Right here?
This is the only place I want to be.
Only place you want to be. I could think of a few places that would be nice to be right now.
I mean, there's like a beach in Cozumel that probably has my name on
it. We booked a 5-day cruise for Emily's birthday in January. So we have this very special place on this very special beach in Cozumel that we absolutely adore. And we're going to get to see it.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time since we went. So we're very excited. I'm really excited for my birthday.
Yes, it's going to be so amazing. Kid-free. Thanks, Mom.
Yes.
Thanks, Dad.
It's our first kid-free vacation in a while.
A little while. Or especially like more than a night or two.
Yeah. Well, unlike an actual vacation, not a conference or like a work thing.
And here's the reality. We're going to work the whole fucking time we're gone. I can't wait. It's very rare that we get to sit uninterrupted for 5 days and build.
Yeah.
So it's going to be lots of fun and lots of time for entertainment, but I can't wait to sit and build a legacy.
Yeah, dream big.
Fucking dive off the cliff. So it's been an eventful week already.
Yeah.
Emily almost got to a fist fight at Sam's Club. She almost smacked down on somebody the other day. So give us the play-by-play. What's going on, Emily? So what happened? She tells me, hey, I almost got into it with this lady at Sam's Club today.
That's not how it went down.
Oh, lies.
All 5'2" of me doesn't get down.
5'4".
No, 5'2".
It depends on which Crocs you have on.
5'2.5" on a good day. No, I went to Sam's Club and, I went by myself with the girls. So I have all 3 of them. And I have the 2 little ones in the great big Sam's cart. And our 7-year-old is walking in front of the cart. And she's, I don't know, 3.5 feet, 4 foot tall.
She's around. She's just tall enough to get on the coasters at Lego
48 inches. And I can't see over the daggone end caps that are, full of chips and Christmas craziness. And she's walking ahead of me and she's 7 and she's not being bad. She's just walking and she can't see. Well, this older lady.
See, you say older. So we live in Florida. There's very wide ranges of old in Florida.
So 60s.
60s. That's not too old.
It's not. It's old enough to know better.
Old enough to know better.
Right? It's old enough to know better.
Old enough to still be accountable. Yes. Or not old enough to not be accountable anymore.
You're not senile. You're just mean. And apparently she was trying to come down the aisle with her cart and Brianna was right at the end of the aisle and was walking out while the lady's cart almost ran into her. Well, I kind of snatched her back and Brianna, be careful, are you okay? And the lady got right in my face. I don't understand why you can't just keep your kids in line. Excuse me.
What'd you say to me, lady?
It was everything in me. It was the end cap with the giant bags of tortilla chips.
You just play the tortilla challenge right there in the middle of Sam's Club.
She wasn't doing anything wrong. She can't see past the aisle.
Yeah.
You couldn't see her. How in the world was she supposed to see you? And the audacity of some people, what did she say to me? Something about, I don't understand why you have to bring kids everywhere. What the hell else am I supposed to do? Where would you like me to leave them? Would you like to babysit? I just don't.
You know what's crazy is we used to be those people before we had kids. Guilty. I remember I was the guy that sit in the restaurant and like twitch because the kid was like tap in or something like that. Like, oh my God, I can't believe people can't handle their kids in a restaurant. Total new perspective as a father of 6. It changes your perspective on things. And I think sometimes people just forget what it's like to have kids, or maybe she had gotten to a point in life and she never had kids. I don't know, but
it takes zero anything to be nice.
Yeah, no excuse.
Like,
no excuse.
I can't, at this point in my life, I've been harassed more times than I can count in a Sam's Club or a
It's
Walmart,
horrible.
either being with 3 children or pregnant. Like, people just are not nice.
So,
and I didn't throw the bag of chips at her.
So Jesus won. Emily didn't beat the shit out of this old lady in the middle of Sam's Club. There have been some incidences where we've gotten into it with people over our children. Like, I'm real protective of our kids in public. So, like, what's your story? Do you have a crazy kids in public story where somebody overstepped and maybe your kids were being a little bit much, but they're kids, right? And as parents, it's impossible to control all aspects of your children. It just is. And if you have kids, you know that you've got a lot more patience for other children when you have kids. And sometimes when you see it out, you're like, oh, thank God it's not just mine, right? Like, every one of them are assholes. And don't I say that, but we love our children, but sometimes they're assholes, right? We all have our moments. So sometimes as a parent, like, you're hearing some other kid throw down when we're out on date night and we're like, hey, thank God it's not us tonight. You get to live in each other's misery there sometimes, but you got to respond well in those situations. And I think you handled it pretty well. But so what's your story? If you've got a crazy, like, in public stranger with your kid's story, want to hear it, shoot us a message and maybe we'll tell your story, anonymous or not, however you prefer. So hit us up. So Emily, this week we're diving into a marriage series that we've been talking about doing. We kind of talked about like the non-negotiables of our family, of our household over the last few weeks. And we filled a couple episodes in between here of just I think couple things that we wanted to touch on. And we've got these 6 pillars that have really been very foundational in our marriage. And just to give you guys some context, we just celebrated 15 years of marriage this year. We got married pretty young.
Yeah, we were 19 and 20.
Yeah, babies. I mean, for our generation, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people our age that still haven't been married. Yeah.
Multiple.
Yeah, I mean, I can genuinely say I do not know anybody our age that's been married as long or longer than we have, which is crazy to me. I mean, but what's really crazy is neither one of us really had fantastic examples of healthy marriages as children. So we both come from broken households. Yeah. So
I have a really unique story. We grew up, I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and my parents struggled early on with infidelity and some marriage issues, and they actually divorced. They separated and divorced, and they were divorced for, I believe, 2 years. The separation and the divorce kind of melded together just because of the age. I was still in elementary school. And they ended up getting back together and remarrying each other.
They did that twice, right?
They did it once. So they were married, divorced, remarried to each other, which doesn't typically happen. Usually if it doesn't work out the first time.
Yeah, usually once is enough.
But I was going into 7th grade when they got remarried. And it was rocky. It was really rocky. And as the kids, we didn't really comprehend why they did what they did. And we struggled a lot because there was a lot of animosity and a lot of hurt that my mother went through because of things that my father did and because of the decisions that they made together. And there was a lot of anger. And so when they decided to get back together, it kind of seemed like out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And like we went from like separate households to literally moving across the state together, and everybody was remarried, and it was like nothing ever happened.
Yeah, just like right back to normal.
And it was weird. And it was like emotionally, it was really hard because we had kind of distanced, as the kids, we had distanced ourselves from our father because we were emotionally hurt. It's
probably really confusing.
Yeah, very.
How old were you when this happened?
6th grade.
Okay.
So like I'm
12, 13.
So
somewhere in
like
there.
add in hormones
Yeah.
and like crazy
Puberty and all that
puberty.
craziness.
And switching schools and going from elementary into middle school and then moving from
all kinds of just change, right?
well, and we moved from Podunk, Panama City, like old country to Miami, Florida.
Yeah, that's a big move.
So, and if you're watching on YouTube, like you can see my hair. I have like, I'm a little bit more olive skin and I've got curly hair. So moving to Miami, everyone just assumed like, oh, you speak Spanish. And so like, I was constantly like at this like language barrier in addition to all of these other traumatic things that were going on at home. I didn't understand anything that was going on at school or with any of the people that I hung out with because everybody spoke Spanish.
So after your parents got back together, what was the relationship like going through middle and high school?
It was rough. For me personally, I didn't have a great relationship with my dad. I was I would say I was closer with my mother. Because she confided in me, probably some things that she probably didn't need to, but she did. And because of that, we had a relationship built on some of our hurt that we had held together and a lot of our hurt that we held towards my father. And so like we lived in the same house, but like there were years that I didn't really even like talk to my dad. Like he was just there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, so they did all of that. They got married. We moved several times. And then the first year I left for college, I came back in the weekend of my birthday. It just fell apart. And like, it was bad. Like throwing stuff in a lake and
it was very traumatic.
Very
right?
traumatic. And it was like the weekend of my birthday.
And so this was the second time they were separating. Yeah. Also infidelity at that point.
Yep.
And so it really drove kind of a wedge for a long time. And I know you've all reconciled now, and I think everything's getting better and is a lot better now. And even in your, I think your grandparents had a healthy marriage or a lasting marriage.
They had a lasting marriage. I don't know that healthy is the right. On my mother's side, same. You're talking a different generation, so you're talking born in the 30s, I guess. And so like divorce you didn't divorce in that age bracket. Like that, it just wasn't, you just figured it out.
Yeah.
And I feel like we watched them survive, but there was never like this, I never saw open affection. We never saw like sweet, tender stories. Like it was never played out. It's
kind of a generational thing too, in that baby boomer generation, that their like fathers weren't real affectionate and mothers were very much just keepers of the households and didn't have opinions and those types of things. It's a different time.
It's a very different time and a different like survival. Like it was very much a survival mentality in a lot of ways. So it was eye-opening. We haven't really talked about this, but on my dad's side, they were married for, I want to say like 46 years. They have a long time. And my grandmother ended up passing away several years back. And she fought a long, long, hard battle with multiple sclerosis. And my grandfather actually became her caregiver full time, ended up quitting his job. They moved from Maryland to Florida so that the climate would be better. But we never saw that open affection. And it wasn't until last year that he was at the end of his life, and I actually moved in with him temporarily for a week and a half. And hearing him talk about his wife and going through and reading his journals, because this man kept a journal every single day for 50 years and had books upon books upon books of handwritten journals on a bookshelf that I had no idea that he did. And he wrote about his wife. And it was something that as a child and even as an adult, I never saw. Yeah. But it was his way of being affectionate towards her, that it was just between the two of them. And it was at the end of his life, it was such a sweet, it was such a sweet way for him to pass on that legacy.
It was really cool to hear some of the stories that came out of that week
Yeah.
and the week or two that you guys were down there. And just the journal reading and some of the stuff. It made both of us start journals, and we haven't been great about keeping to it. It's a habit that I'm working on.
Yeah.
So we need to get back on that. But so your grandparents' relationship was really the only closest thing to a healthy relationship that you had.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Like even all of my friends' parents ended up getting divorced for the most part.
I remember being in school and everybody's parents were getting divorced. Like it seemed like about 8th grade, everybody's parents were just like split.
And if they weren't like, they lived in the house, but they didn't talk to each other.
Yeah. I mean, I had a few friends that had like good home life, but that was the exception, not the rule. Yeah. So
it was interesting. So how would you describe your dynamic at home?
Mine's very unique. So my father has been on death row for murder since I was a month old. That's a whole loaded story, but so I grew up not in a single parent household, but for the most right in a single parent household. My mother had a long-term boyfriend growing up. I think she met him when I was 2 or 3, and they were together until I was like 10 or 11. But I've had a relationship with my father. I've visited him and stayed in touch. Even to this day, we have a close relationship, but it's a very unique relationship, in the sense that he doesn't have a lot of real world applicable knowledge. Yeah. He was only 18 when he got arrested. And so and he didn't have any good examples. Like he was raised, that side of the family is very broken, a long line of addicts and, I mean, just all kinds of generational bullshit.
Yeah.
So there were no good examples there. I guess with the exception of probably my great grandfather, who I don't know anything about his marriage life, but he was a decent man from what I understand. I never knew him personally, but he raised mostly healthy children except for my grandmother, my dad's mom, and grew a very large and wealthy business that he was able to pass on a very healthy inheritance to his children, who blew it, unfortunately. But I don't know a lot about him. So on that side of the family, there wasn't any real examples.
Right.
And then on my mom's side of the family, both my grandparents were divorced. My grandmother remarried, I think 3 times, or maybe not remarried, but it was in several serious relationships after they were together. And she's been in a relationship with my step grandfather now for 34 years. I mean, they met at my first birthday. But we get the little one sneaking in tonight. She's not feeling good tonight. She was asleep on the couch and now she's not.
Mom, I know you don't like the alligator.
She's afraid of the alligator. So like on the grandparent side, no good examples. And then I had a stepfather growing up until I was 10 or 11, who was a severe alcoholic, and abusive at that. And when my mom finally left him a few years later, she got back into another relationship with a crack addict. And so we had that example, and it was never a thing where we were like exposed to the drug use or anything like that, but it was a thing where it was like constantly trying to chase him down and figure out where he was and what was going on. He would just disappear. Definitely not a healthy, father figure. So, I never had a healthy father figure or a healthy marriage to look to, growing up.
So mommy's cold or flu or whatever it was has started creeping its way around the house. So this one fell asleep early tonight, and now that we're up working, she's awake. So you might hear her cooing and talking in the background, but
it's real life, folks.
She just needs snuggles.
We're living it too. So, I know there are some days that you feel like you just can't get a break in or that it's just not going your way, but it's all about them. So here we are.
Yeah.
So Emily, you know, because of the examples that we had and knowing that marriage wasn't a strong suit for either one of our, you know, lineages, we had some pretty early discussions before we got married and early on in our marriage about some things that we just weren't going to budge on. Just things that were going to be foundational for us.
Yeah. And, you know, I think we've mentioned this before in a couple of our podcasts, but from the time that we started dating until we like got engaged was only a month.
It was very short.
And so we knew pretty early on, like, okay, if we're serious about this, we need to have some real conversations because we knew we loved each other. We knew we wanted it to last, but we also knew that it wasn't going to last on its own.
No, for sure.
So even in our ignorance at 19 and 20, we sat down and had some really hard conversations, and we had them multiple times earlier on.
Well, I think I made it pretty clear. I think the first thing that we really discussed before we ever committed to marrying each other, that when we got married, that divorce was not going to be an option. Like it was like, if we were going to do this, we were committing to doing this, and that we weren't going to back out of it for any reason.
Yeah.
And so I think we discussed early on, and we had some great pastoral counselship early on in our marriage where, you know, we were counseled to not even really mention it. Like, hey, like, listen, you can't even say it. Like, you know, I think sometimes as couples, you threaten it or whatever.
Well, and it almost becomes a joke.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you become desensitized to it.
So we don't want to dive too deep because we're going to introduce these 6 pillars, and then each week over the next couple of weeks, we're going to dive into each one of them. So, but divorce it was never an option for us.
And it was a conversation, not just once. It was like, listen, it's not a joke. It's not funny.
Yeah, we had a long engagement. Yeah. Our engagement was for a year, and we lived with each other. Like, we didn't wait until we were married to move in. Yeah. It's not biblical. I know that. You can make an argument if you want to. I don't care what you say. But I mean, I think what we didn't want is we didn't want to move into each other and realize we hated living with each other. Yeah. And there was actually a point, and we're not going to get on to that, but but we lived together, and through that year of engagement, we kind of had that discussion that, listen, are we sure if this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing. Yeah. It's not changing. And the only way out of this is in a body bag or a casket. However you end up in there is between you and God.
Probably.
So, I mean, we made that decision really early on.
Yeah.
But then one of the first things that we did is we decided that we were never going to fight about money.
Well, and that was really personal for me because I had watched.
And me too.
My my parents, like, you had a joint account, but then you had his and hers account. Mm-hmm. And it was like this, like, you don't get to touch my money and you don't touch this money. And I hated that. Like, I hated always being like, well, who do I go to? Yeah. Who do I ask?
It was a constant fight in my house growing up with both step parents that I had growing up. It's who's paying what bills, and I paid this bill. And I said, listen, if we're doing this, like, we're not fighting about money. It's our money. We've got one account. And
that was like one of the first things we did.
Like, we did that the week we got engaged.
We combined our bank accounts. Yeah. There was no his and her money. No. And we didn't even have the same last name. We had just, like, there was just barely.
We had known each other for 6 weeks.
Yeah. There was, like, not even an indent from my ring yet. And we merged all of our finances together, the good, bad, the ugly.
All of them.
And it wasn't good. Like, we did not have money.
No, we didn't have a lot of money to merge.
We had a lot of debt.
Yeah.
But it became our debt versus my debt or his debt. And again, like, that was a conversation, like, we talked about where we were financially frequently and how deep we were going.
Yeah. Like, hey, things aren't going so well, or hey, things are going really well. So, and then early on, one of the things that we had really gotten counsel on throughout our engagement was that you got to have fun in the bedroom. And that's a really taboo topic. A lot of people don't like to talk about their sex life, but we're going to dive into that in a couple weeks. So Mom and Dad, skip that episode if you're listening to the podcast, but
don't skip it. Just Well,
Well,
they can skip it.
they
Our
can skip
parents
it,
can skip
yeah.
it, but like it's definitely not a kid-friendly episode. Not that it's risque, but we want to go into the intimacy
Yeah.
aspect of that. And at 19 and 20, hearing that come from the person that it came from, I mean, it made us like wiggle in our seats, like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to feel about this.
I remember that discussion like it was yesterday. I'm never looking at your wife the same.
So,
Yeah.
but you know, in saying that, the bedroom really became kind of our sanctuary.
Yeah, very much so.
And has stayed our sanctuary for the majority of our marriage.
Mhm.
I mean, right now it has some extra
Occupants.
occupants in it. But still very much a sanctuary.
Yeah.
We wait for her to fall asleep or she snuggles and it is what it is.
No. She's moved. That's nasty.
Well, that's not what I meant. Like she's just there all the time.
Yeah.
So mommy has to move her into the bedroom and
It's like a constant like
yeah.
kid shuffle.
Yeah.
So it's challenging, but we make it work, and it's been a very foundational piece of our marriage. So I think the one thing that really, like when we're talking to other couples and they're telling us like what they're struggling with, I think the one thing that really sets us apart is we talk about everything, and we always have. Like we don't let things fester or bother us. It's very upfront and open, like, hey, that's not cool, or hey, this is working, or what's going on with that. I think you're feeling off.
Well, and I think that because we've done that from the beginning, since we've done that from the beginning, we've learned to read each other pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
That a lot
Yeah.
of times, even when we haven't had like an in-depth conversation that day, we can basically tell by the look on each other's face.
Yeah,
or
I mean, we
like,
can pretty much tell when we walk in the room if something's up.
yeah. And we're very quick to be like, hey, what's going on? Do we need to have a talk? Can we talk about this? And it's very, very seldom like a knockdown, drag out fight. It's usually a very like just heart to heart conversation. Like it looks like you're having a hard time. Can you talk to me about it? Or like, hey, I had a really crap day today and I almost threw a bag of tortilla chips at a lady at Sam's Club. Talk me off the edge.
I can't remember like a real like knockdown, drag out fight. I mean, since we've gotten married, I think we had
Yeah.
a few big fights when we were engaged.
We had one that I
Yeah.
can recall. That was like, and I'll tell that story when we get to that. But, we don't.
We'll just agree to discuss things.
Yeah.
And we can discuss things passionately
Yeah.
sometimes and frustrated, but I don't think like your traditional like couple fight where you're yelling and you throwing stuff and arguing and cussing at each other.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
It really doesn't. And, you know, we don't say that to brag, but because we've really held this, this pillar since the beginning, it's given us the foundation like, hey, this really hurt when you said that, or you didn't let me finish what I was saying, or you misunderstood what I said. We've really formed good communication, like language that allows us to talk and understand what we mean when we talk, which I think is a really interesting part of communication, because a lot of times you say something you don't mean what you say, or it's misconstrued. And I think that there's a lot of issues, not just with marriage, but with all communication, because it just gets lost in translation.
Yeah.
So that's been, if I could say anything about if I can name one thing that I would say is our strength, it's that we like each other and we like talking to each other. So
if you're listening to this and you're not watching the video, Emily has a 2-year-old in her lap right now that is adamantly trying to rip her microphone away from her, and she's going back to lay down now.
sorry.
So it's never a dull moment. Look, guys, we could edit all this stuff out and make it perfect, but we want you to see that like we're in the trenches with you.
Yeah.
Like parenting is a real thing, and sometimes it's not all glamorous. Like sometimes it's hard.
Most of the time
Most of the time it's hard. And you got to be intentional about it.
Yeah.
You've got to know that you're not the only one that feels the way you do sometimes. It's okay to struggle.
Yeah.
It's okay to have hard days. It's how you respond that defines what type of parent you are. So know that you know there are little minions running around our house too, trying to throw some wrenches in the chaos. It's par for the course.
So and we do not always get this right.
No.
And we want you to see that we go through it every single day. This is not something that we're just putting on a show. This is real. And we want you to see that there's hope. If you're struggling, if there's something that you want to fix, or if you want it to get better, we want you to see like it doesn't have to be perfect to be better. And we want to walk on that journey with you.
Well, like these things that we're talking about, right? Like we want to pass on a good legacy to our children. And that's not just the financial side of things. It's not just the knowledge side of things. It's the intimacy and love side of things too.
Yeah.
And we've got two more things that we're going to discuss here, but I think we kind of skipped over this, and I want to touch back to it, that you have to understand that you're the example for the way your kids are going to love.
Yeah.
Right? They watch how you love your husband or your wife, and that's how they're going to love their husband or wife. You think about like all the things that your parents did to you and how they've caused you to react to things in your life. And, it's like that person that never got affection when they were a child. They didn't ever have someone tell them that they loved them or hug them or snuggle with them. And so they're kind of, they have a hard time expressing those feelings now because it wasn't something that was passed on to them. It wasn't normal for them. And so you've got to normalize those behaviors. Like, I want my daughters to know what it looks like to be loved by a man who's a man. I don't want them to accept some other loser's version of normal, right? I want them to have an expectation that I set of what's normal. And I want them to have a healthy reality on what it looks like to be in a nurturing, loving relationship and not have this skewed perspective of what they see on TV, because that's not reality.
Well, and now there's so many other influences even outside of TV that, relationships can be abusive. There's so many other variables that you see play all throughout everything. It's on TV and TikTok and Facebook. And if you're in school, it's in schools. Like you see this brokenness just everywhere. And we become desensitized to it, and it becomes normal. And it's not normal, and it's not healthy. And we want more for our children, all of our children, and for the legacy that we're building for their children's children.
And so if you spend all this fucking time building all this worth to pass on to your children, and you spend all this time, building all of this portfolio and equity and teaching them all these skills and teaching them how to be a halfway decent human being, but they lose all of that in the next generation because they didn't love their spouse the way that they should, and they didn't love their children the way that they should. It's all for nothing, guys.
Yeah.
You did it for nothing.
It's not a legacy.
It's your legacy's done. And so if you're not loving your spouse the way that they deserve to be loved and paying attention to a marriage that needs to be nurtured and built up on purpose, you're missing the whole fucking point. You have got to pour into this thing, because what gets passed on to the next generation is a result of your work with your marriage.
Yeah.
Your kids are watching, and if you don't prepare and give them a good example, they're going to love as shitty as you love, or they're going to love as good as you love, right? And so you have got to be purposeful about these things and purposeful to make sure that you're displaying what it looks like to be loved. Because you want, like I said, I don't know about you, but I want my daughters to have this amazing and beautiful high fucking expectation of what their husband is supposed to be for them.
Yeah.
I don't want them to accept some broke ass loser that doesn't have any ambition and doesn't have any morals and doesn't have any, standards and doesn't know how to integrity and doesn't know how to love his wife or his kids. Those are all things that I want to pass on to them so that they're able to pass it on to their children.
Right.
So that's why this is so important. It's really like it's make or break. Like you can do all the other foundational things, and if you don't fix your marriage, it's all for nothing. If you don't bring your marriage to the next level, it's all for nothing. And if your marriage is awesome, good for you. Like that's awesome. Keep doing what you're doing, keep crushing it, and make sure you're purposeful to pass that on. But if you're not where you want to be, now is the time to start having the discussion about it. Now is the time to start, relaying those foundational things. And so, our faith has always been kind of a big part. That's the next pillar.
Yeah.
We're going to dive into that a little bit deeper. It's a murky topic for us because we've been out of the church for a while, but we're still very much clinging to God.
Yeah.
In a odd lifeboat kind of way. I'm not really sure how to describe our relationship with God right now, but we very much passionately love God. And then the final one is kind of unique, I think, for most couples. We've got the toddler back. We've never bought into this thing, like the sleeping on the couch thing has never been an option for us. And I'm going to claim victory on this one. This was yours. Was my, like, this is not happening. So we got into a fight early on in our engagement, and Emily tried to sleep somewhere else.
Yeah, I tried to get in my car and leave. I was like, I'm going to go home. Go somewhere else. Mad at you. Oh. I don't even know what we fought over. I don't even remember what we were fighting
about either. It was something stupid.
Yeah, it was like probably you put too many pepperonis on the pizza.
I told you, like, hey, listen, if you leave and this is your option every time we fight, I'm done.
We're not doing it.
This is not an option for me. We're not running every time we fight. So we're going to set the standard now. You're going to come back in the house. And I think that I may have helped you back in the house at one point.
I'm pretty sure my buttocks was up in the air and you were carrying me back inside. And I say that in jest because like you brought a sense of comedy to a situation that was a little bit stressful.
Yeah.
And it allowed us both to diffuse enough to come back down to like, okay, let's talk now. And like, that's never happened again. But that story has stayed with us. Mm-hmm. And you're like, listen, I'll pick you up and bring you back inside if you even try.
Maybe take your ass back in the house.
You were all out it tonight, girly. Okay. So, but, and like there's, even when we had a guest room, we never even put a bed in the guest room. It always became an office or like a sitting room with a couch, or an air mattress. Like I can count on one hand the amount of nights that probably not on one hand because of last year.
Well, I mean, and there's been times that we travel and for work or for personal stuff that we don't travel with each other. And so those are the exceptions, obviously, but
it's never,
we don't ever weaponize and I think that's the difference. Like we don't ever weaponize like, hey, I'm not sleeping with you, or, hey, you need to go sleep on the couch. Yeah. Like there are times that like one of us falls asleep with the kids or something like that. For the most part though, we try to go to bed even at the same time now. And I think one of the really cool things that has kind of bloomed out of that is that we kind of have like this nightly debrief where we talk every night about just what's going on with each other. We ask, like, if something's off with someone, we'll call each other out. Like, hey, you were kind of an asshole today. What's going on with you? And we'll have those hard conversations at night and those good conversations at night. Talk about what went well. And that's just something that's kind of naturally occurred out of that.
Yeah. I don't think that was necessarily our plan from the beginning, but it definitely turned into our routine.
Yeah.
And it's a habit that I'm very glad that we made early on. So that's kind of what we want to challenge you with this week is to find time for a daily debrief between you and your spouse. And it can be, at night, going to bed together and hanging out in the bedroom for a little bit before you go to sleep is a really easy way to do that. Don't make an excuse to one of you to stay up late. Go to bed together
Well, and here's the reality is that like not everybody's on the same schedule we are. And so
Yeah.
it might look a little bit different for you and your spouse. But I think one of the things we want to challenge you is you might be like listening to this and like, yeah, that's all fun and dandy, guys, but my husband or my wife is not on the same page as me. They're just not there. They're not ready to change, or they're not ready to do this or do that. And I think that this is a really good place to start the conversation.
Yeah.
And you don't have to tell your spouse that you're having a nightly debrief if they're not on the same page as you, right? You can just be purposeful to talk to them daily about whatever's going on. And that's before you know it, it'll become a habit.
Right.
And what this is about is building the communication habit so that you're constantly discussing what's going on with each other. And so if your time together is at breakfast over coffee, that's fine. If you don't get to see your spouse every day, maybe you work opposite schedules, or you've got a spouse in the service industry and they're not home all the time. Maybe it's that phone call that you guys have every day or every evening before you go to bed, where you're just on the phone together. Whatever that looks like for you, find some time to ask your spouse, hey, like what's going on? Anything we need to talk about?
Well, and there's something really sweet about asking your spouse about their day.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be initially, it doesn't have to be a real intense, like, let's break down all the things that are terrible. Be genuine.
Yeah.
Care about your spouse. Care about what they're going through, and ask them. Be genuine. Like, tell me about your day. What did you do today? How was your lunch? I remember you said you had that meeting with your business partner. How did that go?
Yeah.
If you are interested in where they're at, the natural result of that is a conversation.
For sure.
Because then they're going to, well, tell me about your day. What did you do today? How did the kids do at ballet class? And it turns into a much more fluid thing that happens naturally because it's genuine. It's not forced.
Yeah. And so, and then what will naturally occur is there'll be some other opportunities to have conversation about things. And so this is a great opportunity for you to introduce the idea of, hey, listen, I feel like these are some things we should work on. I feel like there's some areas here that we've got, we owe our children this to give them a marriage that they can have an example. If you're not happy where you're at, maybe encourage your spouse to listen to the podcast. If you don't know how to come out and say, hey, I think I need these things. If you're listening to this and your spouse in the last few weeks has been like, hey, I think you should listen to the podcast. Like, welcome to the podcast. We're happy to have you. It's going to be a wild fucking ride. Hold on. But you've got to start that conversation. You owe it to your children to have the conversation. And it's probably a conversation, if you're listening to us, that you've wanted to have for a while. It's probably a conversation you've intended to have for a while, and you just don't know how to start it. Because here's the reality is, as humans, we tend to avoid uncomfortable things. And it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to have that conversation.
Yeah, it's the elephant in the room, right? Like, it's there. We know it's there, but if we don't talk about it, maybe it'll just disappear.
So I think one of the biggest habits that I'm still trying to perfect as, trying to be successful and grow this thing is, you hear a lot of successful people talk about in their day, picking the hardest thing or the thing that they don't want to do the worst first. And so there's something to be said about just tackling it and just getting it done. And when you just get it out of the way and you're on the other side of it, it's so freeing and releasing that the conversation that will flow after it will be life-changing. So Emily's putting the lammy to bed that Addison has brought her.
Sorry, guys.
So we want to give you that action item this week. Sit down with your spouse and just start the conversation. Be intentional to dig in every day at some point, or as often as you can, whenever you're together or have a conversation. Make sure you're asking. And then when they answer, like, just, oh yeah, well, here's how my day was. Yeah. And just kind of facilitate the conversation. You gotta start somewhere.
Yeah. So, going back to kind of one of our non-negotiables is you can't always do everything, but you can do something. Mm-hmm. And this is something very tangible that you can start today and work forward for the rest of your legacy.
Yeah.
So, and guys, if there's anything that has set our marriage apart, I will tell you that it's talking, having an open dialogue with each other every day that has really, I think, let us go and grow as strong as we have. So if I can encourage you to do anything, it's just talk.
It's definitely been transformative for us. So 15 years, it's not the longest time, but it's a pretty long time. So I know that there's lots of years ahead and lots more lessons. I can't wait, but I'm excited for the journey. And it's been a fucking crazy one so far. Yeah. Damn it, it's been a crazy one. I wouldn't change it for the world. And I hope that you get to say that one day. I hope that your marriage stands the test of time and that you get to fight for it and not make the dirty deal an option. So guys, we thank you for coming on tonight. Thank you for listening. And we hope that you'll join us over the next few weeks. We've got those six pillars that we're going to dive into each week in a little bit more in depth. Maybe we'll have some of you guys on and kind of talk to you. If you feel like you've got some insight here, hit us up. We're going to start bringing some interviewees on and adding some other content to our portfolios. So we can't wait till next week. Next week we'll dive into that first pillar, which was divorce wasn't an option.
Never an option.
Never an option. So you got to make that decision first. So join us next week for that. Until then,
fuck your excuses, guys.
And remember that Jesus fucking loves you. Deuces.